Well, one thing is certain, and it is that Fred Hartley really believes in the power of prayer. And I suppose that almost every Christian would say that they do as well. But unless I'm very much mistaken, it's a whole lot easier for most of us to talk about prayer than to actually do it. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be one of Jesus' 12 disciples? Can you imagine actually being there when he calmed the storm, or when he fed the 5,000, or best of all, when he called Lazarus out of the tomb? What would it have been like to have Jesus as your personal instructor? What would you ask him to teach you? One day, perhaps as much as 2 years into their association with Jesus, his disciples made such a request of him. They said, "Lord, teach us to pray." That request is significant for a number of reasons. First, although he had instructed them on many different subjects, this was the only thing they ever asked him to teach them. I would have asked for some pointers on how to do miracles. It would be very cool to be able to heal sick people or to walk on water. On how to preach and teach, and oh yes, since I was a district superintendent for more than a decade, I would definitely have asked for training in the area of conflict resolution. The disciples apparently thought all of those skill sets were of secondary importance. They wanted to know how to pray. Second, the request is striking because of the timing. I'm pretty sure that if you asked most of the disciples on the day that they began to follow Jesus, "Do you know how to pray?" they would have answered in the affirmative. Of course we know how to pray. We've been doing that all of our lives. We regularly pray in the synagogues, and every time there's a special service for prayer at the temple, we're there. Some of these men had even been taught how to pray by John the Baptist. But after many months of walking with Jesus, nearly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they changed their minds. Only after that extended internship did they conclude that, contrary to their previous assumptions, they knew little or nothing about prayer. During their internship, the disciples had observed that everything that Jesus did, and more importantly, everything he was, proceeded from his life of prayer. If you read the Gospels carefully, especially the Gospel of Luke, you'll see that nearly every major event in the life of Jesus, from the narrative of his birth to his ascension back into heaven, was somehow linked to a reference to prayer. The angel announcing the birth of John the Baptist appears while Zechariah is praying. Mary and Joseph bring the baby to the temple and encounter Simeon and Anna at prayer. After Jesus was baptized by John, Luke tells us that while he was praying, the heavens opened. The dove descended, and the voice of God spoke from heaven. Before he chooses the 12 disciples, he spends a whole night in prayer. And before he performs many of the miracles, he looks to the heaven and prays. The disciples saw all of this, and they came to understand how for Jesus, everything proceeded out of his life of prayer with the Father. More than anything else, they wanted to be like him. He modeled for them a life of prayer, and they asked him to teach them to pray like that. Jesus honored their request, and he taught them how to pray. And they learned what he taught them. How well they learned is evident from the book of Acts, which has aptly been called the record of the early church at prayer. Just as every single significant event in the life of Jesus was preceded by or linked to a time of prayer, so every major event in the book of Acts, beginning with the coming of the Spirit at Pentecost, proceeds from or happens during a time of prayer. Most of the early Christians were not famous for their preaching. The only sermons we know about came from Peter, Paul, and Stephen. They were famous, however, for their praying. And the book of Acts implies that the prayer meetings of the first century church were very well attended. The early days of the Alliance were characterized by this same commitment to prayer. A.B. Simpson and the men and women who gathered around him knew about prayer. It was their secret, the secret of their incredible vitality and production. They understood Jesus' words, "Apart from me, you can do nothing." And those words drove them to their knees. But times have changed, and so have we. There aren't as many prayer warriors as there used to be. Prayer meetings are no longer the best attended meetings in our churches. In fact, I'm pretty sure that many Alliance people rarely, if ever, attend a prayer meeting. I grew up in New Jersey, and one of the Garden State's claims to fame in those early days was that the smartest man in the world lived there. And on any given day, if you cared to travel to Princeton, you could engage in conversation with the great Albert Einstein as he took his daily stroll across the university campus. One afternoon, a young graduate student stopped the eccentric genius and asked for his wisdom and assistance. The student, pursuing a doctorate in physics, had come to the point when he was required to announce the subject of his dissertation. "Dr. Einstein," he said, "I'm supposed to research a topic upon which no one else has written. But it seems as if every possible area of inquiry has already been taken. What should I write about?" After a moment's reflection, Einstein said, "Find out about prayer. Someone needs to find out about prayer." I want to challenge you to join me in a quest. Let's find out about prayer. There are undoubtedly other things to which we need to give our attention. But there is nothing more important or more basic. Prayer really is the primary work of the people of God. Lord, teach us to pray.